So Yair Rodriguez is your new interim featherweight champion. We'll talk about how it goes with Volk a little bit later, but let's start here. He triangle chokes in the second round Josh Emmett. As I mentioned, he's the new interim champion. BC, what did Yair Rodriguez prove with this victory?
That his UBL, Luke, his upper bound limits, as you would say, his ceiling in a potential biggest fight of his career, which he might just get next against Alexander Volkanovski. We just don't know where it is, because what he did in here, and look, you know who had a great night at UFC 284? We'll certainly hear Yair Rodriguez, but Dom Cruz did. And I know whenever they travel internationally, they can shake up the pay-per-view broadcast, and sometimes you get a trio that you love, and suddenly you're like, man, that might be my new favorite trio. Dude, Dom Cruz, I think, might deserve to be in this spot moving forward, and I thought he really outlined perfectly the chances Yair has to take to land these strikes that he does, but that he's willing to do. I guess in some ways you can compare that to the run Oliveira had when he was in those wars one after another, yet he was the last man standing. Luke, I mean, we've known about Yair forever. We've fawned over the potential of his talent forever. It has taken him a while to put it together. I did think that Max Holloway one changed the conversation. This performance right here, obviously had the Ortega fight in between, but it had some unanswered questions. I mean, he can get Josh Emmett into the fight that Josh Emmett wants, which is to get close and unload big strikes. But because of his length, because of his reaction speed, and because of his willingness to get close to the fire without being burned, he's able to get in and out and land fight-altering dramatic strikes, including that left kick to the body early on that landed with, the sound of a baseball bat on a home run swing. Luke, he proved that any given night, maybe even the next fight against the best fighter in the world, you can't count him out, Luke. Dom called him a one of one, and I don't mean to come out here and just steal Dom's analysis, but I thought he nailed it. He is, because very few people, and we said this about Oliveira in his run on top, very few people can execute styles like this and welcome the danger and still find the success without paying for it. And his length, explosiveness, and willingness, and the way he disguises his strikes and gets closer. I mean, he fought that in Josh Emmett's range and absolutely silenced and finished him. Damn, did he come full maturity? Like he's grown in, he's blossomed in to the man that at one point we thought he could be. And even at this point as interim champion, I don't know how good he is, Luke. And that's scary.
Dude, I was blown away by this performance. I mean, I was really blown away. You and I have a high opinion of Josh Emmett, and not without good reason. By the way, he was getting outstruck in the first round, then he drops Yair, and then I thought he stole the first round, to be honest with you. It was, he was getting chewed up a little bit, but then turned the tide with that nuclear power that he has, and I'm like, all right, well, this is the central tension of the fight. But the reality ended up being that, I mean, Yair Rodriguez, dude, we're going to look back on Max Holloway's win over Yair Rodriguez a lot more fondly than we already do. I mean, I think that, honestly, BC, here's something to think about. Max got really chewed up by Volkanovski, in part because Volkanovski, in fact, for the most part, I should say, because Volkanovski's amazing. I do wonder how much that Yair fight took out of him, which people wondered in real time. But now looking back on it, it's like, dude, Yair is a vicious, devastating striker. We talk about guys with big punching power as devastating strikers, or people who, I don't know, have more conventional slick technique. And he's slick as hell, but he's a little bit wild at the same time. And so because he's wild and acrobatic, people think it's not devastating. He is a devastating striker, dude. Those middle kicks to the body of Josh Emmett looked like he had never felt anything like that in his life. And that dude's been through some shit. I couldn't believe how much it made him struggle. But the real thing that got my attention was, BC, Yair Rodriguez has offense everywhere. Everywhere.
No panic when he ends up on his back with a ground and pound wrestling specialist on top of him. No panic, and he gets the finish within 20 seconds. Amazing.
And on top of it, when he got underneath and he extends like an accordion with his elbow and then crunches down and gets it. He's so long and lanky, dude. He is a nightmare. It doesn't matter where you have him. He always has a way to reverse position, find offense, and that offense is usually ugly and devastating. He is an offensive dynamo. And Danny Segura brought this up. He and Brandon Moreno were part of that 2013 class of fighters that the UFC had basically turned into like scholarship athletes to go and train in North America and let's see what they could become. And most of the people I'm sure that they put money in didn't work out. But from the same class, they have Brandon Moreno, flyweight champ, and now Yair Rodriguez, 145 interim champ. Don't forget, also, both guys, for a time, in different circumstances and not for very long, but both guys cut from the UFC before they had to come back to the UFC. If you recall, Yair Rodriguez was briefly let go and then brought back, so that was a thing that happened. And so we're just talking about a guy who has developed a highly unique, totally, just a bruising. His style is like a bully. It's almost like a bully what he does to people, and yet it's all long range, or when it gets short range, he's got nastiness for them there. He is arguably the most offensively talented fighter in the UFC. How many guys have this kind of, and dude, his offense causes urgency, right? Like when he was landing the body kicks to Emmett would freeze and then get hit with another one. And now all of a sudden you've taken two really, really bad, hard shots. They just pile on top of each other so quickly. Everything turns to quicksand with Yair Rodriguez and the punishing strikes like that with him. He may be the most offensively gifted fighter, certainly the most offensively oriented fighter in many ways in the UFC. And I honestly feel like, that's a tough fight for Volkanovski. I think Volkanovski will probably win. I favor him to win, but dude, Yair Rodriguez is a tough guy to beat.
So let's compare slightly here. Now, look, I'm a bigger fan of prime Brian Ortega, meaning the moments, which can be fleeting at times, that he can show you the very best of him. I looked at Brian Ortega heading into that Volkanovski fight as somebody who could, if things went his way and he was able to take his superpowers and put them in, find a moment where he can use them, he could win it, and he showed you that. He put Volkanovski in more danger of losing during this run, short of the fight we just saw, than that we've ever seen, and maybe even comparative to that fight we just saw, which was a decision loss. Yair can do that, Luke, only I don't think he has those same exact flaws of Ortega to welcome danger and wear it, in the sense. Ortega, like Charles Oliveira on that recent run, they've got to take some damage to be in that, to open up the opportunities for them to get the win. Do you feel that Yair is better at minimizing that damage? I mean, it's not as if his aggressive style, which sometimes involves risk-taking, doesn't open him up to strikes against Max, right? I mean, it was a back-and-forth great fight. But I don't think he takes on as much damage willingly as Oliveira and Ortega does to try to have those big moments. And that little slight difference to me makes him extra dangerous.
I just feel like his offense, he's got better defense too. Like he makes better decisions, but his offense just ends up being his defense, which is to say, like, it's so punishing. And again, he can catch you from such different ranges. I don't think folks really realize that and how quick they come, that it ends up causing problems. It gets guys out of their game plans. It gets them hurt, obviously. It gets them panicking. It gets them to just make a series of bad decisions. And so that makes it easier for him to then employ whatever defensive work that he has to. But like, just think about it from underneath the guard. He's not collar tying and overhooking when he's in guard. What is he doing? He's closing the guard and then he's just ripping elbows from underneath relentlessly and very hard. Like, they're not small they're not like the ones like over the shoulder, which are mechanically inefficient. There's not much you can do there. But just it's not that they say he doesn't have defense, but he doesn't find himself. BC, this is the thing, right? Whenever you, like, for example, even when Max would have Yair mounted, right, that's a very dominant position. He wouldn't be able to hold it for very long. There'd be strikes from underneath. He'd cause a scramble. He would somehow find a way eventually to get out of it. So he would have defensive work in those scenarios, but he turns it into offense so quickly. He takes defensively bad situations and finds offense in them. He's just so offensively oriented, and because he's acrobatic and rangy, it's just one of the most miraculous things you're ever going to see. Josh Emmett is a quality fighter, and you would not have known that watching him compete against Yair on Saturday night.
Yeah, but and even in that argument, Josh Emmett did land a couple big shots where you're like, oh, one of those could change the entire direction of this fight. Yair took those very well, Luke. He is becoming a special fighter. I don't know enough. I haven't followed his specific, probably because I've not interviewed him during this run yet, but I don't know behind the scenes what clicked, but something changed. And you're right, and I've made that point in the past about that. We'll look back at that Max fight as a major turning point. What do you think has changed for Yair? Is it just maturity and focus, Luke? Because there's a level of poise and dialed-in focus that just wasn't there in those previous runs.
So let's talk about something that he did. How about those body kicks, right? We all remember the body kicks that he landed from opposite side stance. What you saw him doing was initially low kicking, and then he would feint the low kick, switch stance. Emmett would back up just a bit, like, oh, what's happening here? And then move into range. And the instant this all happens very quickly. And the instant he pops back in, boom, Yair set him up and landed on him. And then, by the way, what would he do behind the kick? He'd throw the punch right behind it, right? So boom, boom. It's like a 1-2 thing. So what do I bring this up to say? Before, I think he was just kind of you'll still see it in the UFC. You'll see fighters come in, usually in the lower levels, and they just joust with one another. They don't feint their way in. They don't trick their way in. Everything is just about force meeting force and then seeing who the better guy is. But that's a real meathead way to fight. The better guys, the really better guys, don't do that. What you see from Yair Rodriguez was he used low kicks and feinting to get himself into the stance and distance and to get the reaction that he wanted out of Emmett to make it all work. He has got different tools to play with that have elevated his game in BC. This is what you're picking up on. Everything seems to gel together now because he has not just this tool, that strike, this punch. It's all a system that he has built. And now he executes the system. And what you're noticing is, wow, it all works together so well. Right. That's a developed fighter.
Well said, Luke Thomas. Well said. Are you transitioning out? Because there's a couple of loose ends that people want us to address here, Luke, overall.
I can transition out, but real quickly, how do you feel like a fight between Volkanovski and Rodriguez looks like?
Great question. I agree with you that you're going to have to favor Volkanovski, and if you said who's more likely to win him, because what makes Volkanovski great, he's got an answer for everything, and he's not going to be overwhelmed in any category. Potentially, unless you're against this type of striker who can disguise, launch, and connect explosive type of strikes, Luke, at any given moment that can alter things. Now, you know, is he gonna one strike knock out Volkanovski? Probably not likely. Volkanovski's shown a chin and an ability, as we mentioned with Ortega fight, to get out of gnarly situations with extreme focus and confidence and poise. And damn, did he do things on Saturday that elevated him enough for me to keep him number one pound for pound. But if you're asking me who at featherweight right now, because, you know, I don't know if Ortega's going to ever make the kind of run to get back to the top I want him to. I don't know if Zabit's ever coming through that door again, Luke. And if he does, you know, he may never be the mythical hero that I look at him to be. This is the guy, Luke. This is the guy that can do it. And we have to remember that, because in this sport, especially at the late level, you can lose a million ways and anything can happen. Look at Edwards versus Usman and Poatan versus Adesanya to prove that. He's got a very good chance of winning this full championship. And this, it's funny. We've said it and it's right. Volkanovski versus Makhachev on paper, one of the best fights of this era in terms of like stakes, combined talent, win streaks, pound for pound placement. And oh yeah, it also delivered. But Yair versus the champ here, pretty good too, Luke. Okay, one of the best fights you can make in this entire sport this calendar year.
If you just think about title fights you can make, that's one of the best ones. And here's the thing: I think Volkanovski is a better overall fighter than Yair, no doubt about it in my mind. But Yair is so fucking dangerous.
Styles, dude. I hate that cliche, but styles do make fights. What about these styles? Damn.
Right? That one, whenever they make that one, is a fun one. And BC, first time in UFC history, 2 simultaneous Mexican champions.